Welcome to the world of floating shelves, where elegance meets engineering. A floating shelf is a type of shelving unit that appears to hover on the wall without visible brackets or supports. The secret? Hidden mounting hardware concealed inside the shelf itself. Today, we're following a professional carpenter through every single step of building one from scratch. You'll see precise measuring, careful cutting, expert sanding, strategic drilling, bracket installation, meticulous leveling, beautiful finishing, and the final wall mounting. By the end, you'll understand exactly how these seemingly magical shelves come together. Before we dive into building, let's understand what makes a floating shelf different from traditional shelving. Traditional shelves sit on visible brackets or rest on supports you can see. Floating shelves use concealed mounting rods or plates that slide into channels carved into the back of the shelf. These hidden supports are first secured to wall studs, which are the vertical wooden beams inside your walls that provide structural strength. Then the shelf slides over them, creating that clean, minimalist look. The key is precision. Every measurement must be exact, and the hidden channels must align perfectly with the wall mounts. Our carpenter begins by selecting the perfect wood for this project. For floating shelves, you want a hardwood that's both beautiful and strong enough to support weight without sagging. Popular choices include oak, maple, walnut, or cherry. The board should be at least 1.5 inches thick to accommodate the hidden mounting hardware and still look substantial on the wall. Our carpenter examines the grain pattern, which is the natural lines and texture you see on wood surface, looking for straight, attractive grain with minimal knots or defects. Quality wood selection is the foundation of any successful woodworking project. Measurement is where precision begins. Our carpenter uses a tape measure to mark the exact length needed, let's say 36 inches for this shelf. He makes small pencil marks at both ends, then uses a carpenter's square, which is a perfectly angled tool that ensures 90-degree corners, to draw straight cutting lines across the board. He also marks where the hidden channels will be routed on the back. Every mark is double-checked because there's an old carpenter's saying, measure twice, cut once. One wrong measurement can ruin an entire piece of expensive hardwood, so this step requires patience and attention to detail. With measurements marked, it's time to cut. Our carpenter clamps the wood securely to his workbench to prevent any movement during cutting. He's using a miter saw, which is a specialized power saw with a circular blade that drops down to make precise straight cuts. Safety first, he wears safety glasses to protect his eyes from sawdust and keeps his hands well away from the blade. The saw screams to life, and he guides it smoothly through the wood in one steady motion. The result is a perfectly clean, square cut. For floating shelves, clean cuts are essential because any angle error will be visible when the shelf is mounted. Now comes the specialized work that makes a floating shelf possible, routing the hidden channels. A router is a power tool with a spinning bit that carves grooves, channels, and decorative edges into wood. Our carpenter carefully measures where the mounting rods will sit, typically 2 channels running horizontally along the back of the shelf. He sets the router depth to about 3/4 of the shelf's thickness, never going all the way through. Using a straight-edge guide clamped to the wood, he makes multiple passes with the router, gradually deepening the channels. These grooves must be perfectly straight and parallel, or the shelf won't slide onto the wall mounts properly. With cutting and routing complete, it's time to sand. Sanding smooths rough surfaces and prepares wood for finishing. Our carpenter starts with coarse grit sandpaper, around 80 grit, which has larger, rougher particles that remove some marks and shape the wood. The grit number tells you how many abrasive particles fit in a square inch, lower numbers are coarser, higher numbers are finer. He works systematically across all surfaces, always sanding in the direction of the grain to avoid scratches. Then he progresses to medium grit at 120, then fine grit at 220. Each stage removes the scratches from the previous stage, building toward glass-smooth perfection. While the shelf is being perfected, our carpenter prepares the mounting hardware. Floating shelf brackets typically consist of steel rods or flat plates that attach to the wall. These must be incredibly strong because they'll bear the entire weight of the shelf plus whatever you place on it. Our carpenter lays out the bracket assembly, checking that the rods are straight and the spacing matches the channels he routed in the shelf. Some systems use two separate rods, others use a single welded bracket. He'll need heavy-duty screws, at least 3 inches long, to penetrate through drywall and deep into the wall studs for maximum holding power. Installation success depends entirely on finding wall studs. Drywall alone cannot support a loaded shelf, you need to anchor into studs. Our carpenter uses a stud finder, an electronic device that detects density changes behind the wall. He moves it slowly across the wall until it beeps and lights up, indicating a stud. He marks the stud locations with light pencil marks, then confirms by measuring. Studs are typically spaced 16 inches apart in most modern construction. He double-checks by tapping the wall, listening for the solid thunk of a stud versus the hollow sound of just drywall. This careful verification prevents installation failure. Before driving screws into the wall, our carpenter drills pilot holes. A pilot hole is a smaller hole drilled first to guide the screw and prevent the wood stud from splitting. Using a drill bit slightly narrower than the screw shaft, he carefully drills into the marked stud locations. He holds the drill perfectly level, using a small bubble level attached to the drill to ensure the holes are horizontal. This is critical because if the mounting rods angle up or down even slightly, the shelf won't slide on smoothly. Each hole is drilled to the proper depth, deep enough for the screw but not so deep that it weakens the mount. Now our carpenter mounts the brackets to the wall. He positions the bracket assembly so the rods align perfectly with the pilot holes, then drives the heavy-duty screws through the bracket mounting holes and into the studs. He uses a power drill with a screwdriver bit, but doesn't over-tighten, which could strip the screw holes or crack the drywall. As he works, he constantly checks level with a long spirit level, a tool with a liquid-filled tube containing an air bubble that centers when the surface is perfectly horizontal. The bracket must be absolutely level, or the shelf will tilt visibly once installed. This step requires patience and frequent measurement adjustments. Before mounting the shelf, our carpenter applies the finish. Finishing protects the wood from moisture, stains, and wear while enhancing its natural beauty. He's chosen a clear polyurethane finish, which creates a protective plastic-like coating. Using a high-quality brush, he applies thin, even coats, working with the grain. Polyurethane comes in different sheens: matte for a flat, natural look, satin for subtle shine, or gloss for high shine. Our carpenter is using satin. The first coat raises the wood grain slightly, so after it dries completely, typically 4 to 6 hours, he lightly sands with very fine 400 grit sandpaper before applying a second coat for durability. After the first finish coat dries, our carpenter performs a crucial step that separates amateur work from professional results: sanding between coats. Using ultrafine 400 grit sandpaper, he very lightly smooths the surface. This isn't aggressive sanding, he's just knocking down any raised grain, dust particles, or brush marks that dried into the first coat. He wipes away all sanding dust with a tack cloth, which is a sticky fabric that captures fine dust particles regular cloths would miss. Then he applies the second coat of polyurethane, this time working even more carefully to avoid bubbles or drips. Some professionals apply 3 or even 4 coats for maximum protection and depth. With the finish fully cured after 24 hours, it's time for the moment of truth: test fitting. Our carpenter carefully lifts the shelf and aligns the routed channels on the back with the mounted rods protruding from the wall. He slides it on slowly, watching for any resistance or misalignment. If the channels were routed correctly and the bracket installed level, the shelf should slide smoothly onto the rods until the back surface sits flush against the wall. If there's resistance, he doesn't force it; instead, he removes the shelf and identifies what needs adjustment. A perfect test fit means the measurements, cutting, routing, and installation were all executed correctly. Even though the shelf sits securely on the mounting rods, our carpenter adds an extra safety measure: set screws. These are small screws driven upward through pre-drilled holes in the bottom of the shelf, through the routed channels, and into the mounting rods. This locks the shelf in place so it can't accidentally slide off if bumped or pulled. He uses a drill with a right angle attachment to reach the screw holes in the tight space between shelf and wall. The set screws are countersunk, meaning they sit below the wood surface, and he'll later fill these tiny holes with wood filler that matches the finish, making them invisible from below. With everything installed, our carpenter performs one last critical check, verifying level. He places his spirit level on top of the shelf, checking both front to back and side to side. Even tiny deviations are visible to the eye when you place objects on the shelf. If adjustment is needed at this stage, he can tap small wooden shims, which are thin wedge-shaped pieces, behind the shelf where it meets the wall. However, if all previous steps were executed correctly, no adjustment should be necessary. The bubble centers perfectly in the level, confirming the shelf is truly horizontal. This final verification ensures both structural integrity and visual perfection. Before declaring the project complete, our carpenter tests the shelf's load capacity. He gradually adds weight, starting with lighter items and building up to heavier books or decorative objects. A properly installed floating shelf in hardwood with mounting rods secured into studs can typically support between 50 and 100 pounds, depending on length and wood thickness. He watches carefully for any sagging, creaking, or movement. The shelf remains rock solid, demonstrating that the hidden mounting system, when correctly installed, provides strength comparable to traditional visible brackets. This load test gives confidence that the shelf will perform beautifully for years to come. The transformation is complete. What started as a rough piece of lumber is now an elegant floating shelf that appears to defy gravity. The hidden mounting system is completely invisible. There's no hardware, no brackets, nothing to interrupt the clean lines. The wood grain glows under the polyurethane finish, and the shelf sits perfectly level, ready to display books, plants, photos, or decorative objects. This project demonstrates how traditional carpentry skills, combined with modern concealed hardware, create furniture that's both functional and beautiful. Every step, from selecting quality wood to the final level check, contributed to this professional result. You've now seen the complete process a master carpenter follows to build floating shelf perfection.